efforts. And if you look at the bottom, sometimes and always was greater than never and rarely. So this subset, the principals did fairly well in that too. Next one. Managing the instructional program. Provides or locates resources to help staff improve their teaching, regularly observes classroom activities. After observing classroom activities, they work with the teachers to improve their teaching, frequently discusses educational issues, buffers teachers from distractions to their instruction, encourages you to use your data in your work, encourages data use and planning for individual student needs. Equal, greater. So here actually go ahead and go to the next slide because I kind of put it in sentence form in my discussion. And then these are the two questions that I added to be able to answer my research question. Currently, how often do you feel your school is adequately moving towards school renewal? And 11 people said sometimes or always, which is pretty good. And then progress towards school renewal takes time. Knowing this, how would you rate your school as making great progress towards school renewal within 2 to 5 years? And there we had 9 people say likely and 3 said very likely. So that was pretty good results there. Go ahead and go to the next one. So here going to just a little bit more. Setting direction, subset 1, rated fairly well. Items 1 and 4 were rated the highest. They give staff a sense of overall purpose and demonstrates high expectations of your work with students. Developing people also did very well. However, item 5 did not. It gives you individual support to help you improve your teaching practices. Redesigning the organization. This subset fared the best with participants answering sometimes and always, more often than they answered never or rarely. And then managing the instructional program, subset 4. This area was the weakest of the 4 subsets, with the exceptions of items 19 and 20. They scored fairly well on those, encouraging you to use your data in your work, and encourages data use and planning for individual student needs. So they did pretty good on both ones. The student researcher objective questions, item 21, 11 of 16, or 68.8%, feel that their school is adequately moving towards school renewal, at least sometimes or always. And item 22, 12 of 16, 75% feel their school is making great progress towards school renewal within 2 to 5 years. So based upon the participant responses to items 1 through 20 and 21 and 22, the results support the research hypothesis, which was when teachers select positive characteristics of their school leadership in conjunction with the traits of transformational leadership, they will evaluate their school as significantly moving towards school renewal. Chapter 5, my discussion and recommendations. These are pretty brief, but my discussion is that this research was a baseline study and there is no plan to conduct a follow-up at this time unless I were to pursue my doctorates, which I do not have in my mind right now. However, future studies of transformational leadership in schools on Native American reservations would be a great contribution to the knowledge field of transformational leadership and could possibly serve as an indicator of needed professional development areas for school leadership. Because just like teachers, we need professional development. We need to be learning new ways of getting better at what we do. So do principals. They're people. You know, they need to learn too and keep getting that training. Next slide. Recommendations. Rutledge recommends that Leithwood's transformational leadership model be implemented in schools because it provides school leaders with specific sets of practices that can easily be implemented into any school. The model also addresses the daily management as well as providing direction, establishing relationships, and initiating change within the organization. His study supported transformational leadership as positively relating to academic optimism. And this here is just, it's a model I found. Set the example and model the way. Take people places they have never been. Get people excited about going to new places. Enable others to act through coaching and support. Build relationships based upon trust and respect. And the next slides are my references. I am still finishing up my thesis, chapters 5 and 6, but this is the meat of it, just the main focus points for my discussion and for my recommendations. And that is it. Any questions?
I have a question. Right away.
Yeah.
The state has required that our teachers be evaluated every year. Is your school, and also principals, so do you know what measure your school is using as far as principal evaluation? And is it similar to this, or what would your recommendations be?
Like I said though, I didn't mean for this to be used as an evaluation. I just wanted to see, are they exhibiting these traits? Are teachers happy? Are they, I do know that principals are being evaluated, and I don't know what model that is. The superintendent would be the one to model or to evaluate them. I do know we do a, what is that survey? A climate survey for each school, and if those climate surveys score fairly high, or they're more positive, then that reflects also on the building principal. So, Andrew?
On page 6, the bottom one, we were talking about that, and it says, my question is, would it have been helpful for your audience to know all the sensitivity issues with the OSTRRB, to mention that in your report?
Like to go into detail with what I went through with that process?
Yeah. 'Cause I went through that. We all did it.
It was a very frustrating process. It was, however, with my paper though, I didn't want to delve too deeply into that. Just stating that maybe I could add a little bit more about some of the things that happened, and
yeah, some of it would be helpful for your audience, because
yeah,
you want to get into more depth of really identifying things on the reservation, but there's a lot of sensitivity issues that we're going through.
I thought of that too, but just for the scope of my paper, that could be a study. Some of the things that happen that are unorganized or don't go the way that it should have. But the main thing for me is it held me back from sending out my survey for probably about almost 2.5 months because of the turnover rate and my stuff getting lost. But I powered through it. I did want to walk away from it about once a week. But I just kept remembering, I've never been one to quit something that I start. So I kept with it, and the lady that started at the RRB, she was brand new. They threw her in there, and she tried to learn her job the best she could and as fast as she could, and being in the situation she was in too, I felt for her. So I'm just kind of like that. So I moved past it.
Okay, also going through that experience, wouldn't it help your audience to if you put a little bit of that in your findings too?
Yeah, I mean, I have more in my findings. This is just I didn't want to go through like 100 slides tonight. But you can read my paper when it's done. Hopefully it's washed day. But I could add a little more, into that part, I think. I'll seek some advice.
Sure.
I think one of the things that we really need to understand is that in past years, people have come to our reservation and did studies on our people and have left and didn't ask permission or anything. They just came in and they're putting information out there that possibly may not be true about our people. So the tribe now has a research and review board to assure that that doesn't happen and to assure that nobody is put in harm's way when research has taken place. For this department, it's important for our students as part of the learning processes to present themselves in front of that board so they understand the importance of the research processes and to make sure that they're not putting anybody in harm's way with the research that they've done. So that is the purpose of the RRB. Mm-hmm. I really commend them because what I see happening on the side is that they assist us in educating our future leaders so they understand the processes of research. And you can see from her, there's some powerful stuff that came out of this research here. And that's why I'm asking, do you see this as a tool that would be very informative to our future principals within our school system as far as their conduct and behavior in accordance to transformational leadership to change our schools? Some of you that have been in education, you might begin to look at those questions of what transformational leadership is and the parts that she evaluated. And you're going to say, well, our principal never does that. Rarely, just like that. That's powerful information. And it's good information for those of you who are going to be principals to see how our teachers have evaluated principals and take a self-look at yourself to see, well, I don't feel too confident in that area either. Through research and the studies that you did, you now have the tools to go out to find out how to be better in those areas. So just remember that the RRB is not there to condemn you or to put you down, but it's to assist us as tribal members to conduct this research that is so badly needed here on our reservation.
Can I say something?
Okay.
I don't think I guess when we say the RRB, like it went like the RRB, this process, I shouldn't have said that. It wasn't the actual members of that board. They all showed up and were there to do their job. It was the health administration, the people who oversee the office, to take our applications, make sure all our paperwork is in, to make sure everything's uploaded onto Axiom, which is an online tool that they use so that they can view all of our documentation and everything. Mm-hmm. It was a person had quit and it was a trainee that was basically then left with getting all this research, because it's not just ours, it is a lot. Like, they have binders of people who want to do research here. So they're having to go through all that and deal with, trying to get ours approved and stuff too. So I wouldn't say, I guess we shouldn't say the RRB. It was miscommunication. It was lack of organization in that office with the personnel who were supposed to be overseeing, making sure the RRB got all of our documentation. So, I just wanted to clarify.
And that's such a big feat for you guys to go through. Mm-hmm. Besides the tribal research and review board, they have to go through the institutional review board too. So a lot of other universities don't have you go through 2 reviews, but they did. So it's part of our program, and it's to get them prepared to go out there to understand the research processes. So it was a good experience.
Yeah, I grew from it, definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Who do we have? I'm forgetting my lineup here. Tracy? Okay, same deal. Tell me when you need to move from one side to another. And I can guarantee I'm going to be a little better at it. It's going to be a few days.
Okay, well, my name is Tracy Fortin. Thank you for coming, especially my committee members. I didn't make a handout, so if you need to move forward, feel free to. Mine is titled The Implementation of a Behavior Intervention Model at an Elementary School. Ampeti Washde, Tracy Fortin Machiapi, Tapcha Wakwa Elwati, Ina Mitawaki Brenda Provost Echiapi, Ate Mitawaki Calvin Coates Echiapi, Michimsi Kane na Cord Echiapi, Michimsi Coral na Timber Echiapi, Mokida. The location of the study is in the Midwest, somewhere. The school, the data comes from an elementary school in the Midwest. There's approximately 220 students and 50 staff members. To determine the implementation of a behavior intervention model, the purpose of the study is to determine if the implementation of a behavior intervention model improves student behavior. If it does, if it is successful, it will improve the climate and culture of the school. There will be a survey that will be conducted to determine that. In addition, if a positive behavior intervention model improves behavior, students and administrators can spend less time on behavioral issues and more time on the delivery of instruction and student achievement. Student achievement will not be included in this study due to the change in state testing to the Smarter Balance test. Because it was a baseline year for scores, there is not enough data to compare. The issues for the school district, with this one school in particular, which is in priority status, are the lack of academic achievement on state assessments, poor student attendance, and the outstanding number of office referrals. The study will look at the number of office referrals from before implementation and the data from 1 year in progress. The attendance percentages from before implementation, once completed, and 1 year after, and then the perception of improved climate and culture of the school before and after using the positive behavior intervention model. The data for climate and culture will be determined from a survey of school staff. Definitions of terms. Behavior is defined as the way in which one acts or conducts oneself, especially towards others. It can also be defined as the way in which a person acts in response to a particular situation. School climate is defined as the prevailing psychological state of the students and staff within the building. School culture is defined as the shared patterns of behaviors and interactions, cognitive constructions, and effective understanding that are learned throughout a process of socialization. ODRs are office discipline referrals. Office discipline referral is when a student has reached the level 2 on the discipline matrix and will be handled accordingly by the office personnel. Perception is defined as the way in which something or someone is regarded, understood, or interpreted. The ability to see, hear, or become aware of something through the senses. Academic achievement is the measurable outcomes of the problem-solving, critical thinking, and reading skills taken from state tests. A reward system is a structured method of evaluating and compensating students based on their performance behavior. Reprimands are severe or formal scolding by a person of power. Priority status is when a school has been identified as the lowest performing 5% of Title I schools in the state over the past 3 years, or any non-Title school that would otherwise have met that same criteria. Some of the limitations are there is no other current data on Native American students on reservations. There's no true way to determine if the school-wide Positive behavior model is used with fidelity. It's only expected that it's being followed appropriately. Climate and culture surveys were only given to teachers. Students did not take the survey to give their perception of the improved climate and culture. Students on behavior contracts or learning disabilities were not excluded from the study. Students and staff from the beginning of the implementation to after 1 year may differ. Transfer students fluctuate at a high rate in the school district. Some of the research has shown that behavior modification programs have had a positive effect in schools by lowering the incidences of problem behavior. As Wong suggests, influencing the role of a few factors on school climate should be studied further to best assist schools, which often deal with limited resources such as money and time. According to the literature, several factors, including student-teacher respect, quality of the building and materials, the feeling of safety, caring, and encouragement, and discipline, all have an effect on school climate. One study suggests that schools should not focus on discipline alone when seeking to improve student perception of overall climate. In a 2001 study, they used ODRs, Office Discipline Referrals, to evaluate the implementation of a behavior program over a 3-year period, which included the baseline year. The results included a 28% drop in office referrals in the first year and a 41% reduction from the baseline year during the second year. Breaking down the data further, there was a significant decrease in the 7th grade referrals and a less significant effect on the 8th grade referrals. Behavior intervention models are a framework or approach for assisting school personnel in adopting and organizing evidence-based behavior interventions into an integrated continuum that enhances academic and social behavior outcomes for all students. It's a prevention-oriented way for school personnel to organize evidence-based practices, improve their implementation of those practices, and maximize academic and social behavior outcomes for students. This model supports the success of all students, according to pbis.org. Evaluation studies that use research quality measures document both implementation of the core feature by typical school personnel and their improved academic performance or reduction in office discipline referrals. Methods used: a school culture and climate survey will be given to staff members at the elementary school. The questions pertain to their perception of improved behavior of students and the improved overall climate and culture of the school. The number of office discipline referrals from the years 13-14, and we'll compare them to the 15-16 school year. The attendance percentages from the 13-14 school year will be compared to the attendance percentage 1 year later to determine if there was a decrease in attendance issues after implementation of the behavior intervention model. Research questions being addressed are: did the implementation of a behavior intervention system change the staff perception of climate in the elementary school? Did the implementation of the behavior intervention system change the culture to be more positive in the elementary school? Did the amount of office discipline referrals decrease after implementation of the behavior intervention system? And finally, did attendance improve after the implementation of the behavior intervention model? The elementary school serves approximately 220 students, with 99% of them being Native American. There are 13 certified staff members, 9 paraprofessionals, 1 principal, bus drivers, janitors, and cook staff, and office staff that total about 50 staff members. In the fall of 2014, 213 were enrolled. By winter, the numbers were closer to 250. In May, the numbers ended with 229, so that shows the fluctuation that we have throughout the school year. The population of the student fluctuates throughout the year. Although there is the fluctuation throughout the year, the overall attendance enrollment did not change drastically from the 2014 school year to the 2015 school year. To give you an idea of class sizes, I have the enrollment there. And kindergarten had 2 classes, first grade had 2 classes, second grade had 2 classes, third grade had 2 classes, fourth grade had 2 classes, fifth grade was 1 class, sixth grade was 1 class, seventh grade was 1 class, and eighth grade was 1 class, for a total of 213 students. The data from the discipline referrals stored in-house along with the attendance data will be used to conduct an analysis from one year to the next to determine if there was a decrease in student discipline referrals and or a decrease in attendance issues. A paper pencil format survey was given voluntarily to the staff that met the requirements to determine their perception of the improved climate and culture. No identity of the participants will be used in the survey. It will be anonymous and conducted in the paper pencil format. They will complete the survey. The survey answers will be compiled into one document that will be kept secure on a laptop which belongs to the elementary school, and a computer usage agreement has been signed. Surveys will be shredded immediately after they're compiled. Student discipline referrals will be compiled and kept on the laptop as well. Original referral forms will stay at the elementary school under the program site used to store student data. All participants are already under a confidentiality agreement for student information as pertains to their employee contract. The elementary school will be able to track the time of day students incurred most office discipline referrals, the behaviors resulting from those referrals, and the frequencies of the referrals at the elementary school. Administrators can use this data for prevention, intervention, and to develop appropriate consequences. The data collected from the survey is given to staff, will be summarized and compared. It will begin with the 2014 school year. Those referrals will serve as the baseline to compare the number of referrals at the end of the 14-15 school year. This will have allowed the behavior model to have been implemented and in place for one complete school year. The survey will be given to staff in January to determine if their perception of the climate and culture has changed since the implementation of the behavior intervention system. The findings. The old discipline matrix consisted of 5 different classes of offenses and 41 different event types. Figure 4.1 on the next page will show a total of 22 event types, with the events totals being 404 for the 14-15 school year. Bus incidents total 28% of the office discipline referrals. Insubordination came in second with 18% of referrals, and instigation with 10% of the referrals. Once the data was reviewed and the problem areas identified, the discipline matrix was altered. There are now 4 infraction classes instead of the previous 5, and 30 event types instead of the previous 41. And there are the findings. There are all 22 listed there. The very bottom shows the bus incidents, but the highest amount of office discipline referrals. I can tell you some of what they are. It starts with bus incident, insubordination, instigating, skipping class, inappropriate behavior, bullying, disorderly conduct, verbal abuse, name calling, disruptive behavior, drugs, pushing, shoving, fighting, noncompliance, threat, intimidation. There's another category: theft, larceny, AWOL, vandalism, sex offender, weapons, and false fire alarm. Okay, the figure 4.2 on the next slide shows all the classes 2, 3, and 4 for the 14-15 school year. Since there were changes made to the matrix and offenses moved from one class to the other, the data does not show bus incidents, insubordination, inappropriate behavior, or instigating. All those are now considered class 1 that do not require office discipline referral. Those are to be handled by the classroom teacher. And so with the new findings, our biggest one would be disorderly conduct, bullying in second, battery, threat, intimidation, skipping class, larceny, theft, fighting, tobacco, sexual harassment, false fire alarm, and drugs. So for the 14-15 school year, there were 13 event types of office referrals, 113 different events, and 63 students with the office referrals. The results of implementing the positive behavior intervention model and the changes that came with it, including the changes with the discipline matrix, have shown a decrease in overall office referrals. The office referrals from 2013-14 totaled 404 with 117 students committing the offenses. So in 2014 and 15, there totaled 117 of office referrals with 63 students committing the offenses. The school goal was to reduce office referrals by 30% in this year, with the baseline office discipline referrals being 404 and 117 for the following year. Using the behavior intervention model, the data determines that this elementary school reached the goal of 30% in reduction. It actually showed a 71% reduction in the first year of implementation of the behavior intervention model. The results of the behavior model climate and culture survey was the majority of staff noticed less student disruptions, more respect shown to each other, and an overall change for the better in student behavior. Even though 74% of staff saw less student suspensions, they did not feel they saw a decrease in the amount of office referrals. 86% agreed that they used the behavior intervention model. 43% of the staff feel that the behavior intervention model is not used with fidelity. And there's the findings. I put 2012 in here for the attendance, just so you can see the 3-year span. So in 2012-13, we had 90.97. The following year is 90.04, and then it dropped down to 89%. And there's a new reporting system. That's why there's 2 there. They changed the way you report, so it actually showed at like a 67%. And on the next slide, I believe I have that explained. So in 2012 and 13, it was 90.94. Then in 13-14, it reached 90.04. The attendance for 2014-15 after implementation was 89%. So there was a change in calculating in the state reporting system, which changed it to 67.36. So overall, there was a steady decrease in attendance over the years, including the year the behavior intervention model was implemented. There is no indication that the behavior model improved attendance at all. References? Are there any questions? Mark?
Good job. I was just thinking about, trying to think of what my question was. I should have wrote it down. I guess the attendance, what's the deal with attendance? Because, you know, initiation, that was the year that you initiated. It was 90%. It stayed consistent the second year of the program, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then it began to drop after that.
With the new reporting system, it showed a drastic drop. And I put the old reporting way in there to show that it's a steady decline over the last 3 years. So we were hoping that the intervention model would raise the attendance scores, but it didn't.
Wasn't it, for the whole school, 94% of the students had to be in attendance for the year or something, and then you would make your goal for the state, but then they changed it to, was it each student had to have 94% attendance?
Yeah,
for
and
the
that's
year.
why it shows such a decrease.
Yeah, they changed the way they calculated it.
Yeah, it was the overall student body, and now it's each individual student. So if one student has poor attendance, it doesn't.
A change of behavior.
Yeah, that's hard, and that's why I didn't do the academic piece, because of the change in state testing. So they're with 2 different tests, and it's almost the same way with attendance. If it's a different reporting system, it's not going to report accurately. And that's why I did put in the old way also, along with the new way, so they could see. But it was still a decrease, so.
But it did show in a way that behavioral model was working in a way, right? It showed that.
It showed, yes, that there were less office discipline referrals, but there was a change in the way that they wrote up the students. So the matrix changed. So a lot of bus incidences that we seen first now became class ones, which aren't referrals to the office, so they weren't calculated in there. They follow the matrix, so if it's the bus driver, if it's a first offense, it's teach the right way. Second offense is teach again, contact a parent, sister classroom, detention, something like that. So it doesn't get recorded as a class 2 offense. And it used to be just one on its own, and now it's implemented throughout the matrix. So if it's
Do you think they should have been left separated?
for this comparison, I think so. But now it's written up not as a bus incident, it's written up if they fought on the bus, it's under fighting.
Oh.
So it's not labeled a bus incident, it's just labeled fighting or cheating or instigating. So it's just distributed throughout.
I think it would be more similar with the percentages if it was left all on that same form. Because now, like, for instance, if you have a student with 3 class 1s, it's not in the system because you took care of it yourself. You know what I mean? So,
And in my thesis paper, I will have it broken down where the ones that are on the baseline, I'm going to pull the class 1 infractions that weren't actually discipline referrals and compare them individually, and there's 4 or 5 of them on there that will be in the paper. So it'll be a kind of a better comparison. You can tell if it's working on those individual infractions.
Because I looked at the bus incidences, and as an administrator, principal, it looked like it's an issue. So how do you change that? Because the data tells the story, right? I'm not asking you, but see what I mean?
are there bus monitors there now, or have there always been?
Yep. On certain routes.
Or you have to ride the bus with the bus driver? Do the rest of the teachers? Probably, right now?
Oh, no, not
No,
them.
no, we don't. No,
Oh.
they have certain people hired to be bus monitors.
Oh. But were they bus monitors when that number was so high? Wow. So is it working or not?
Well,
As a future principal.
well, the bus incidences are still written up if it's one of those, so it would still show if there was fighting, anything that's a class 2 offense. All the class 1s, if they're just being loud, then that's the responsibility of the bus monitor or the bus driver to move that student or teach them appropriate. So. Okay, thank you.
They're not.
So about 2 weeks ago, I had a chance to go over my presentation with Art and Loretta, who gave me a lot of helpful feedback, including to shorten it. So I cut off 2 slides, so it's a little bit shorter, and it shouldn't take more than a chunk of time. The topic of the presentation and my research is the indigenization of evaluation, and in particular, it is specifically working to develop a teacher evaluation tool for Little Room School. Oglala Lakota yellow, chante washte nape ochilosh pape yellow, was uche mikaje ki Alex maki imachiapi yellow, miata ki John makie, na inawaya ki Ruth makie chiapi, ate achi atanhan tun kashilo we Frank, wait ki Frank makaj, chiapi na unchi waya, ki Winifred Regalski a yellow, inawaya achi atanhan, ni tun kashila ki Ernest Bellhorne, na unchi waya ki Virginia Mueller a yellow, Windermere, Florida, Ima Tanhan, Eas Bejutahaka, Elwati. So my presentation follows along largely with the structure of my research report. The first section of that is the introduction to the material and the background itself. Back in 2010, the state legislature of South Dakota determined that teacher evaluation systems in the state were not entirely effective, and they passed SB, which stands for Senate Bill number 24, which was with the South Dakota State Department of Education, which was tasked with developing a teacher evaluation framework based on the Danielson framework, which we'll go over in a bit. The conclusion of that bill was in 2015 when the state published its South Dakota Teacher Effectiveness Handbook, which looked at requirements, support systems, and state model recommendations, outlining how the DOE, or the Department of Education, felt as though evaluation should be done. It included the Charlotte Danielson Framework for Teaching as the base of those school-based evaluations. And it said that at a minimum, schools needed to evaluate teachers on 4 of the framework's total components. Therefore, this research project was to determine which of those 4 components Little Wound School should evaluate its teachers based on. It's not just a state thing, however. These schools are required by the BIA as rapid improvement indicators to follow these certain guidelines, and approximately 15% of those explicitly indicate that the Danielson Framework should be followed. This is the Danielson Framework, which was developed in 1996. The Danielson Framework is split up into 4 different domains. The first one is planning and preparation, which is subdivided into 6 components, which are sub-elements of it. Below each one of those are even smaller, discrete characteristics of how a teacher in that domain would function. The second domain has 5 components, and it looks at the environment of the classroom itself. The third domain looks at teacher instruction, and the fourth looks at professional responsibilities. I know when I was looking at it for the first time, I was really surprised that only a quarter of it dealt with instruction, because I think it really takes into account that holistic nature of teaching as a profession. The issue that my research seeks to address is the fact that Little Wound hasn't done this yet, and they're still looking to develop a teacher evaluation tool that's based on those particular components. Currently, there's also a dearth of research on what the elements of instruction are that are most closely associated with effective teaching, including in the minds of students, teachers, and administrators, which is another thing that my project sought to do. And finally, because schools have leeway to decide within that Danielson framework which components they'll choose, my research was designed to narrow that down for Little Wound School decision makers and come up with a model teacher evaluation as well. So the guiding question of my research was, which components of the Danielson framework make for the most effective teacher? I decided to phrase the question in terms of that way, instead of what components should be evaluated by a school, because ultimately we should have teachers who believe that they are effective teachers, not effective on evaluations. And so I chose to approach it from that angle as compared to the other way. So the project was a survey-based one, and I sought to survey the teaching staff at Little Wound School, as well as the administrators and adult-age students. One reason that I chose to interview adult-age students was that I wanted to keep the vocabulary of the Danielson framework at its current level, instead of attempting to scaffold it down toward the middle and elementary school levels, because I thought it was important for students to see exactly what Danielson meant, and I thought that my translations wouldn't necessarily carry over to those younger levels. Survey respondents also identified if they had previous experience or training with the Danielson framework, their gender, their years of teaching and or administrative experience, as well as their enrollment in the tribe. There were 4 research questions that guided my project. The first was whether or not students, teachers, and administrators would have different or similar views as to the components of the Danielson framework in making for an effective teacher. My second research question was, can variations between student, teacher, and administrator responses be attributed to those demographic identifiers, including their length of teaching or admin experience, gender, employment position, or other identified factors on the survey? The third research question wanted to look in particular at whether student and teacher responses would mirror or juxtapose one another. Those 2 groups work in very close collaboration, so I thought it would be really interesting to see how those 2 separate populations view this. And finally, I decided to look at, are there particular components of the framework that are unanimously believed by all 3 of those groups to be the most strongly preferred components? This slide looks at some of the limitations and delimitations of the research. Limitations are the things that I as a researcher would not have control over, whereas delimitations are my personal decisions that impacted the research. We'll take a look at the limitations first. The first one is that not all teachers had experience with the Danielson framework. I know at Little Wound we had a training on it approximately 3.5 years ago, and so if teachers came in after that particular training, it's conceivable that they didn't have a professional foundation in the framework. Second of all, the population that was surveyed was very narrow. It was done only at Little Wound School, and one of the primary reasons that I chose to do that was that this framework is only for Little Wound School. And so in my mind, at this stage in the research, it didn't make sense to interview other schools. Third, not all students in the school were surveyed. That's again because of those two reasons that I went over before, because I didn't want to have to scaffold down the vocabulary so that we could have a more accurate interpretation of the framework. Finally, this just creates a snapshot for the most part of those individuals who are at Little Loon during the spring semester of 2016. And so as staff come and go, those opinions and those perceptions of the framework might change, which would influence how evaluations might be done in the future as well. And finally, correlation never equals causation. The delimitations it was a personal choice to only interview those individuals at Little Loon School. Again, because the purpose of my research was specifically to come up with a framework for evaluation for Little Loon. Also, I decided to ask what makes the most effective teacher, not what is important in a classroom observation. Part of the reason why teachers are very overburdened, and the teacher might say, I'll choose an easy topic because I want to be evaluated lightly, instead of identifying the most important component. And third, a survey was the only method of information and data collection used. I think an opportunity for extended research might be to take a more ethnographic approach and do interviews with teachers, admin, and students as well. Section number 2 begins to turn toward the historical context of evaluation, as well as some contemporary literature on the topic. I've taken a historiographical approach to my literature review, so I go through in a chronological order for the most part. We go back to early American history in terms of the 1700s as when evaluation really started to be brought to the light. At this time, most schools were community developed, and they were funded and run by families within a small town. And those families were the ones who chose the teachers and evaluated those teachers in whatever manner they saw fit. The 1880s in particular began to see a rise of centralization, where schools became more similar to each other. And that was largely driven by Horace Mann and his Common School movement, which encouraged teachers within a school to have a principal teacher, which was still often chosen by the community itself, who would be able to evaluate the other teachers within that particular school. The 1900s saw a crisis of purpose. We saw two really different fields of view in terms of what the purpose of the school is. John Dewey was on one side, who said that a school's primary purpose is to expand democracy and democratic thinking. And he said that the only true way to measure a school is to see how students engage in the civic process. Whereas Frederick Taylor took a very different approach, and he saw it as a more industrial system where we can measure the outcomes that a school is trying to accomplish. And that's spread across all the different schools. Schools are not different. Over time, it would bias towards Frederick Taylor's view, where we saw great centralization. Part of this is when the federal government and states began to take a more intricate role in the process of schools, where they started to come up with statewide and nationwide assessments. In the late 20th century to 1999, we saw a rise in clinical supervision, which is where principals and teachers were said to work together to ensure student success. In a lot of ways, however, it was considered very formulaic and didactic because it was the same evaluation across schools. And finally, there was, again, little contextualization for the individual school needs because it was so uniform. Charlotte Danielson came in 1984, though, and said that perhaps there's a different way to do it. And she came up with her 4 domains of observation, including planning and preparation, classroom environment, instruction, and those professional responsibilities. And since 1980, the Danielson framework has become the most common form of evaluation because it provides a lot of leeway and flexibility for schools, districts, and administrators. Looking at some contemporary trends in observation and trying to get a picture of where observation is going, the general consensus now, for the most part, is that in order to create a better school, it's important to build up and support those teachers who are in your classroom. Second of all, observations and evaluations are designed to come up with more targeted in-services. Finally, you can remove underperforming staff on the condition, for the most part, that efforts have been taken to attempt to build up that staff member and provide them the in-service and support that they need. Observation is also a foundation by which to design more efficacious in-services. So if the principal sees that their teachers are struggling in one particular area, it might be a way for them to say, hey, this is an area where I can provide better support to my teachers. It's also important to have conversations about teaching and effectiveness, because it's not enough to simply observe a teacher unless that conversation happens around it. And finally, avenues for peer observation and feedback are becoming more common as well. We'll hop into the research methodology, which is the third section of this report. The research was conducted at Little Room School, and the participants were 53 teaching staff, 8 administrators, and their same adult-age students. I made sure to ensure privacy and human rights by going through a lot of different avenues to make sure that the approval was there, including the school, the tribe, the college, and my committee. The procedures, first I went to the Little Room School Board and had an opportunity to discuss with them my desires for the project and its opportunities to drive school decision-making. A survey was given to individuals over the course of 1 week, and data was eventually analyzed using Systat in order to get those inferential statistics out. I had very high success rates in getting a return on my surveys because I like to think that I built some strong rapport within the school, and I had an opportunity to talk with many of the people in the school about my research itself. And so we had over 90% in those 3 different groups. Okay. What I've done for the review of the statistics that I've come up with is divided into the 4 different domains. We'll have an opportunity to look at the domain beforehand, then we'll be able to look at some of the statistics and the analysis that came from that. We'll hop into domain number 1 first, which is planning and preparation. Just like before, the domain is divided into 6 different components, each of which express in particular detail how planning and preparation should be done within the school. It includes demonstrating knowledge of content and pedagogy, as well as students, setting instructional outcomes, showing knowledge of resources, having coherent curriculum, and designing student assessments as well. Again, below each one there are separate elements. On the survey, teachers had an opportunity to identify which component to choose. They also had a chance to see the discrete elements below each one in order to make a well-rounded decision. This is the responses from domain 1. Because this is the first chart, I'll take a little bit more time to describe the information that's included within it. So in this particular column are the absolute number of responses by these separate groups to each of the different components. Just for reference, I've included the components at the bottom so that you have an idea as well. N stands for number, which is the total number of responses from that particular group. These are the results of our ANOVA analyses. This one is a chi-squared value. The higher the number, the less homogeneous the responses are, which would indicate that teachers had a strong preference toward one particular component or 2 over the other ones. And this leads to a p-value, which is the probability that it would happen over time. So as we can see here, it has 3 asterisks next to it, which means that that's a statistically significant response, whereas the ones without it demonstrate that there is not a statistically significant response. One thing to take a note of is that in every case, the administration did not have a statistically significant response because the sample size was too small to power the surveys, or to power the statistics at least. So we can see here that teachers and students did demonstrate strong preference toward the particular components. We can see in particular that component B and component F received the most responses. I've also taken the liberty of highlighting or bolding the 2 most common responses among all respondents, just so that we have a little bit more clarity on what that is. We can see that both men and women demonstrated a statistically significant preference toward components B and E as well. And we can see that in tribal membership, only those enrolled individuals demonstrated a strong proclivity toward B over the non-enrolled members as well. So the 2 most common ones were demonstrating knowledge of students, as well as design and coherent instruction. Okay. For those of us who don't remember Algebra 2, this is a box and whisker plot. A box and whisker plot is an opportunity to see the distribution of the responses. So we can come down here and we can see the different components of the domain. So again, there were responses with an A, B, C, D, E, and F. This is the years of teaching experience for those different respondents. This is the first quartile, second quartile, third quartile, and fourth quartile. So as we can see it spreading across all the different years of teaching experience, we can see that in domain 1, component A, there was broad support among teachers of little, mid, and high experience. Whereas, interestingly, component C we see here had only responses from teachers who had less than 10 years of experience. Just as we go forward as well, sometimes there are asterisks or circles at the top which indicate that those are statistical outliers. We'll turn our attention now to domain 2. Domain 2 is the classroom environment. It has 5 components that make it up, including creating an environment of respect and rapport, building a culture of learning, managing classroom procedures, managing student behavior, and organizing physical space. We have another table with our chi-square and p-values. We see a little bit less statistical significance in this particular domain, but we still see within enrolled tribal members, females, and teachers that they had a very stated preference. It is components A and B that receive the most support from all respondents. Admin, again, like we said before, below, we only had 8 respondents because we do not have a significant number of administrators. And for the most part, a sample size of 30 is what will allow a very strong result that you can draw an inferential statistic from. Men did not have a significant preference, so that indicates that they had homogeneity in their responses, which means that for the most part, they were about even in all of their different choices. Women, however, strongly preferencing A and B, and enrolled members A and B as well. Non-enrolled members, even though there was just a marginally significant response, we can still see that A and B are the 2 most common responses. On this box and whisker plot, we can see that A and B not only are the most common, but they also show the most broad support among teachers of different experience levels. We can take a look at D, again. Interestingly, it was only chosen by those individuals who had less than 10 years of teaching experience, and no individuals chose component E. So the 2 most common and the 2 most preferred broadly were creating an environment of respect and rapport, as well as establishing a culture of learning. Domain 3 looks at instruction. It has 5 components, including communicating with students as 3A. 3B is using questioning and discussion techniques. 3C is engaging students in learning. 3D is using assessment in instruction. And 3E is demonstrating flexibility and responsiveness. This one we see marginal, sorry, I've had allergies for a couple days. Marginal significance, but we do see a higher rate of statistical significance among all groups. In fact, within domain 3, it is only administration that lacks any type of statistical significance. But again, we wouldn't have expected any anyways. We can see that teachers and students are largely aligned in their responses toward A and C. A being communicating with students, and C is engaging students in learning. As we were going through the research, one thing that I thought was really interesting was that in every single case, students chose the component that was student-centered. So in this particular case, we can see that most students biased toward communicating with students because it involved them in the process, which I thought was a really important observation. Okay. Looking at this box and whisper plot, we can see that A and C again are broadly supported by teachers regardless of their years of teaching experience. Whereas component D, again, for the most part, only novice teachers, novice being less than 10 years of experience. E had some, but not as broad as A and C. And B had no responses as well. So we can see that A and C not only having the most responses, but again, wide support. Domain number 4 is the final domain of the Danielson framework. It includes professional responsibilities, which are reflecting on teaching, maintaining accurate records, communicating with families, participating in a professional community, growing and developing professionally, and showing professionalism. I was very surprised in the research that within Domain 4, there is no statistically significant response, which indicates that students, teachers, and administrators had a very wide opinion as to what makes a professional teacher an effective teacher. We can see, however, though, that within components, E and F were the 2 most commonly chosen, which is growing and developing professionally and showing professionalism. We won't spend too much time here, again, because no statistical significance. Looking at the box and whisker plot, I think it's really interesting that E was one of the most commonly chosen ones, but it was heavily biased by novice teachers to the point where it pulled it down so far. F, however, did have a wide range of support, as did D, B, and C. So we can see, again, wide support all across the board, which indicates a lack of statistical significance. We'll move to the findings and discussions, which are the 4th and 5th section of my report. And we will begin with, this is variance among student, teacher, and administrative responses. This helps to answer some of those research questions that we had taken a look at. In particular, do students and teachers show proclivity toward the same answers? We can see in this particular one less so in this one, slightly less in this one, that they do in fact have largely similar answers. But because there was no statistical significance within the fourth domain, we can't adequately answer that particular question. I believe that this is one of the most helpful graphs in my research. What it does is it takes the four domains and it indicates what percentage of respondents chose it as their first response, and when you combine the first and second responses, what percentage of people fall within those two. So if we take a look at domain 1, we can see that 43% of people chose component B, which is demonstrating knowledge of students. But if you combine B and E, which includes designing coherent instruction, it gets up to a total of 71%. We can see that for domain 2, again, 38% for the top choice, domain 3 is 48%, domain 4 is 28%. I think it's interesting that among the top choices, not a single domain saw more than half of the respondents choose one particular component within that domain. However, if we take a look at the top 2, we see a lot more concentration among the top 2 responses, except for domain 4, which again saw a wide variety of choices. I took the liberty of taking a lot of research into account to determine which component should be chosen within the different domains for evaluation. Domain 1 is planning and preparation, and I chose component B. I'll go into the reasons why I chose these particular components in the next slides, which is demonstrating knowledge of students. Domain number 2 is the classroom environment, and it is component A within the Danielson framework that should be chosen, which is creating an environment of respect and rapport. Domain 3 is instruction, and component C was chosen, which is engaging students in the learning process. And domain 4, we see professional responsibilities. Component F should be chosen, which is demonstrating professionalism. Again, we'll go into the reasons why. In particular, we'll look at domain 4, which did not have a statistically significant response. Looking at domain 1 then, component B is a very student-centered choice, which I thought was a really nice thing. But not only did I think it was nice, it also fit in with the Littleton School Board policy, which says that the school's mission is to provide a sacred environment for students to achieve academic excellence. So if we are there to provide that excellence to students in terms of academics, we should have a student-centered component chosen for this particular domain. If we look at the 6 discrete components of the first domain as well, component B is also the most preferred among respondents. This one was the easiest to choose a particular component because of these 2 reasons. Within domain 2, we see a slight preference among teachers for component B over A. So 20 to 18 respondents respectively, so they're actually very close. But a broader lens shows that component A, which is building an environment of respect and rapport, is more generally acceptable among all the survey respondents. If we take into account the school's stated relationship with its Lakota values, however, we know that respect is very important, and so that's why component A was chosen, which is the manifestation of that respect between students and teachers. Domain 3, we see a slight statistical significance toward component C, which is engagement, over A, which is communication with students, as an indicator of teaching effectiveness. But this is supported as well by federal law. So back in December of 2015, the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA, was passed, which clearly indicated its very strong support for increasing student engagement, which is component C of domain 3, as well as the fact that the federal government's belief in the centrality of student engagement and the fact that schools will soon be measured on this particular component is a really helpful reason to include it as well, so that schools can make sure that they're on the right path. Finally, within domain 4, which is professionalism, there was no statistically significant result found regarding the responses in domain 4's components. However, if we look at it a little bit more closely, we see that it begins to point toward component F, which is demonstrating professionalism. It was the most widely supported. However, it's backed up as well by statistical findings. This is one particular research study that looked at the role of professionalism in teaching, and it indicated that it's in fact one of the most important characteristics of a teacher in terms of getting those students engaged in learning. So the Trickner's research was part of that process of determining that component F was in fact the right one to choose. The research conclusions, there were 3 of them. The first is that a teacher evaluation tool can be developed, so it's not something that cannot be done because there's no consensus. Second of all, there is a general preferential consensus that does exist between all the domains. And finally, teachers, students, and administrators do in fact have similar views on the components of effective teaching. Our last section that we'll take a look at is implementation. Again, the purpose of the research is to come up with a model teacher evaluation for Little One School to adopt based on the findings of this research. And we'll take a look at that here. So the basis of my recommendation is the findings of the research, which is a modification of the South Dakota Framework for Evaluation, is proposed for use. So I was able to come up with one. Within those 4 domains, there were identified components of principal supervision that are relevant to the elements constituting each which a teacher should be evaluated upon. And finally, the model that I have proposed takes into account the preferences of those teachers, students, and administrators of the school, and it falls within the components of the Danielson Framework. I did not include the entire evaluation that I am suggesting. However, I'm including one small part that highlights what the entire evaluation would look like. So the evaluation is divided up into the different domains, and it indicates which of the components should be evaluated. And it asks the principal to evaluate that teacher on those discrete elements that constitute that component. The Danielson Framework independently comes up with its rankings of unsatisfactory, basic, proficient, and distinguished. And the Danielson Framework also includes specific explanation as to how that teacher can be identified as any one of these 4 evaluation areas. So the principal, when in the classroom, would have an opportunity to work through this, see what a model teacher would look like, see what an unsatisfactory teacher would look like, come up with the comments that allow them to make that decision, and then give it to the teacher, ideally in the form of a conversation, not simply placed in their mailboxes. This is the overall evaluation. I chose not to include the full drawn out evaluation like on the previous slide, because it would have taken more than one slide. This one fits on one slide. If we take a look at domain 1, we can just see those particular elements that allow us to see what should be evaluated. Again, component B is chosen, which is knowledge of students. And the elements in particular are the knowledge of those characteristics age groups, the students' varied approaches to learning, their skills and knowledge and their interest in cultural heritage. Within domain 2, component A is chosen, which is to create an environment of respect and rapport. And those elements are teacher interactions with students and student interactions with other students. Domain 3 is component C, which is engaging students in learning. And the elements are below it again, which is the activities and the assignments that the teacher provides, the instructional materials and resources used, how the teacher groups those students, and the structure and pacing of class. And finally, in domain 4, component F is chosen, professional responsibilities, which is integrity and ethical conduct, services to students, advocacy, decision-making, and compliance with school district regulations. I personally think that this is a model evaluation because in a lot of ways, current evaluations only look at some surface level things within the classroom, but they often don't take into account things like those professionalism, the advocacy for their students, how the students are interacting with one another, and so many of these other smaller elements. Around 1850, Crazy Horse said that a great vision is needed, and it must be followed as the eagle seeks the deepest blue of the sky. I appreciate that quote because I think it fits well into the research. This is a first step in determining what that vision is, and moving toward full implementation of a robust teacher evaluation system. But I'm hoping that the research that I presented and will present to the Little Wound School Board is a first step in developing that ultimate framework. There are just some references, but as Art flips through them, are there any questions on this that I can answer?
I have a question. That was internal,
Right.
and yet we know, like in any school, at Little Wound, we have a lot of external forces on it, called parents, called grandparents, and how they perceive of the teacher's performance.
Mm-hmm.
Did you reflect on that at all, and where there would be a place for that fact, and since it does play in decision making?
Mm-hmm. It most definitely does. I chose not to include the survey for those particular individuals because I wanted to focus on that internal mindset and really get a sense of what people within the system who are actually functioning within the system see as a most appropriate tool for evaluation. I think that we can look at the community as a strong benefit in providing insight as to how teachers are doing, but we all know that there can be those individuals in the community that over-influence the material that happens within a school as well. And so a school does need to strike that balance between how much are we going to listen to the outside versus how much will we listen to internal information. It is reflected in the community's input and evaluation in my overall thesis. It was not addressed in this PowerPoint.
Have you presented this to the faculty yet?
No, I have not. I decided to wait until the program, that's true, one faculty member. I have decided to wait until the thesis is fully approved and the research is finalized before making those formal presentations.
Do you perceive any types of professional development possibly based around the outcomes of this study to prepare those teachers for evaluation?
I think that it could be a really helpful thing. I know in a lot of ways teachers are a little bit confused oftentimes as to what they're being evaluated on, because right now for the most part it's simply circling a number here or there, and that really doesn't give us that insight as to what a teacher is performing well at and what they're not performing well at. So I think that in-service is needed both in two ways. The first is in-service as to what this evaluation looks like and to what the school as an internal body has said are those important components of teaching, as well as seeing then, after this is implemented, where those teachers are struggling and developing those targeted in-services to help them become more proficient in those areas.
Language is very interesting, and the term evaluation, for many people can be stressful, can be a real. What if we use terms like development, teacher-centered, teacher-identified areas of development and interest, so that the engagement by the teacher is a little bit different than, we're peering at you.
Right. Because I think a lot of teachers do have a very negative relationship with evaluation, because a lot of teachers see it as, here's this one time that my administrator will come in and determine whether or not I'll work at this school for another year. Whereas evaluation should in fact be more of that one-on-one professional development to help those teachers recognize how they're doing, and not to fire them, but to give them the supports that they need to get there. In a lot of ways, I see the research that I have as more like an infrastructure of teacher evaluation, and the vocabulary around it could absolutely be changed to bring that buy-in, but I don't think that it diminishes the value of what was found in the research. But yeah, absolutely, there could be ways to change the vocabulary to make it a stronger buy-in.
Go ahead.
I have a question. The Charlotte Danielson model is required for public schools.
Right.
And for Little Wound School, are there any plans for implementing the other components throughout the years, or just stick with one for each?
I know that the state of South Dakota has said that it does need to ramp up until the point where it is fully evaluating on all the components. The schools within the BIA system are encouraged to start small, I suppose is one way to put it, and then build it out. So this was designed to find those first two that might be used, and then leave it up to the school thereafter. Because again, we know that turnover is very high, and perhaps in 5 years' time when we're evaluating more, all of the opinions would be different.
Have you considered how clinical supervision might assist kind of with what she's saying also, but also to help them teachers become better at what they do?
Right.
And part of your forum looked like that because there was a comment area in there. But I guess I'm asking you as a future administrator, how are you going to deal with the outcomes?
I know that I find a lot of personal frustration with evaluation systems as they currently exist, because they take place in the absence of conversation in a lot of ways, and evaluation should be the basis of that conversation. So administrators should go in before the observation say, okay, what are you doing in class today? How are things going? How are the student dynamics? Are they changing over the course of the year? Have that evaluation, which should be at least an hour, if not more. I know that my brother is a principal down in Dallas, and he's required to observe each teacher 10 hours per semester. I've been observed significantly less over 4 years. And so I think that there's a lot of conversation that surrounds strong evaluation, not merely evaluation as a tool in and of itself.
It could be formal or informal too, like walkthroughs, like that. I think I told you that years ago when I became a teacher here on the reservation, My observations were done by listening to the intercom from one principal. They said, "You didn't come in my room." What do you mean you evaluated me? The other one, she sat outside of my classroom. It was not informative at all.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is how probably some of you have been evaluated as teachers. It wasn't helpful or not, but it was threatening in a way. It was like, finally I just said, you know, I'm not going to change the way that I teach because I'm being observed. Just come in. And you do get used to being observed as a teacher. At least I did. You know, it's like they're not there. Because if you're really into teaching, you're into the kids and how they're learning and looking at their interactions and everything and how they're responding to you. But that was some of my experiences as being evaluated as a teacher. It wasn't until I left the reservation that the principal kept on coming in over and over, and finally I said to her, "Am I doing something wrong so you're in my classroom all the time?" State requirement that maybe we weren't following here on the reservation says new teachers, whether you're a novice teacher or whatever, new teachers to the system should be evaluated at least 6 times per academic year. We're not doing that, I don't think. And I don't know if that requirement is still there from the South Dakota Department of Education, but I learned that from being off the reservation, you know, that it's there. So I do happen to know as administrator it's difficult to make yourself or find the time to go in to observe teachers. I guess another question, because of that, how are you going to deal with that?
Mm-hmm. I personally think
Put you on
that
the spot or whatever.
I entirely agree. I think that in a lot of ways principals get into this mindset of here's an issue, allow me to fix that at this particular moment, as compared to working to build up those institutions that allow them to do their primary job. Because, sorry, allergies again.
Join the club.
Because looking at that history that we went over, the word principal comes from the fact that we are the principal teacher, not a principal in terms of a position. And so we have to be there to support those teachers and to help them become better. And so in fact we have to look at this, what is the primary responsibility of a principal? Obviously there are many, but I personally think that evaluation is a central component.
Yeah.
In that it does take precedence.
I can add to that. During my internship, I cannot even imagine where the principals would find time to do their walkthroughs and observations with the amount of behavior situations that they had to deal with, and just everything else going on. Like, I think every school should have that specific person who deals with the behavior part of it so that principals can focus on the instructional part of it.
In my years as teacher, a lot of our principals had physical education degrees. And it's like us as teachers who've gone through a complete teacher preparation program in the background would say, really? Telling us how to teach with a physical education degree? I mean, that's what's good about you guys, is because you have those teaching experiences. A lot of times I didn't have that. And it does make a difference. You need that experience. You need to, you know, and you're going to use that experience because you're making those connections with those teachers. You've lived it. You understand it. That's why you're going to be powerful principals. Believe it?
Yeah.
Believe it. Or fake it till you believe it. That's one of my sayings I used to say to my kids. I'd put it up on my wall every year. They'd look at it and they'd say, fake it till you believe it. They'd come up, Mr. Fisher, I can't draw. Mr. Fisher, I don't know how to do math. Finally, they would start, like, here's 2 students say, I don't know how to do this. Another student would go, fake it till you believe it. And sometimes you have to do that. And it has a lot to do with your confidence and the way you carry yourself and everything. Okay. I think y'all did an excellent job tonight. We got one more to do. And I have to make an internet connection to do it. So I'm a little bit nervous about that, making this connection.
Fake it.
Till you believe it. All right, we're ready.
Okay.
Everybody, we're ready.
We're set.
All right, guys, everybody quiet, phones off.
Okay.
An assessment of Nebraska state education, 4th grade standards and culture-based education. Second colloquium, Testa Hinapui Porbear, April 21st, 2016.
Hang on, move slide.
Go ahead and go to the next slide. Madakiapi la apetuki iohila chantewa stan apetu ochius bakba. Tesomimia inawayaki wilmakala ichiapi. Atewayaki waju hokshila ichiapi. Washichu tajaki to Webster Porber ichiapi. Lips tioshpaye imataha. Omaha, Nebraska, Alwati. The focus of this research action paper is to assess the alignment between the Omaha Public School 4th grade standards in math, language arts, social studies, and science, with culture-based education teaching strategies and pedagogy, while providing an overview of Omaha Public Schools' contextual framework to ensure the academic and cultural needs of American Indian students in Omaha Public Schools are being met. The literature review shows an understanding of culture-based education and how it correlates to the state education standards in one American public school system. Throughout history, the national decision makers alongside leaders, families, communities, local teachers, and administrators have had many trying conversations discussing the education of the American Indian students and how they fit into the American education system. The research revealed that many federal policies established to directly and indirectly control American Indian learning environments. Simultaneously, this paper will look at the history of the decision-making by American political leaders pertaining to all of the students in the public school system of America and how it has been impacted and now being guided towards culture-based education. Specifically, laws and acts such as the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, the No Child Left Behind Act, and now the Every Student Succeeds Act, and that was most recently signed by Obama in December of 2015. Accordingly, the American Indian learner vested within the population has a culturally appropriate manner to which they fit into this public school system based off how they learn. This research paper is significant to the American Indian educator, public school agencies, and advocates who influence federal, state, and local decision-making for American Indian students. Go ahead and go to the next one. Boy Blitza. La Woapiska ki ikche wichasha we unspe ichiapi. We chon unspe ichichiaye. Ohinia pe. Dokshi ikche wichasha unspe ichichiaye. Na ska wichasha nisha tokshi uspe ichichiaye. La owaiwa ki tokshi taku ichun he Omaha, Nebraska al unfazo be. La wo unspe ki toshki iechel iglaglaka iyanki ki unfazo. There has been an increase in federal attention to the issue of the use of native language and culture to promote school success among American Indian and Alaska Native students. On December 2nd, 2011, President Obama issued Executive Order 13592 for approving American Indian and Alaska Native educational opportunities and strengthening tribal colleges and universities. The secondary data that was utilized in this research action paper will focus on the Unified School District of Omaha Public Schools in the city of Omaha, Nebraska. This research action paper intertwines understanding the complex learning needs of the American Indian learner while embracing the teacher that seeks to empower the American Indian and Alaska Native learner. In researching culture-based education and assessing the contextual framework of Omaha Public Schools, both the teacher and the established collaborative effort of leaders within OPS have a great opportunity to provide some positive avenues for academic success for their 900 plus population of American Indian learners. The professional atmosphere within Omaha Public School System is already perpetuating a cohesive learning environment for its American Indian students. This research action paper will provide an analysis of these findings. And you'll find that President Obama, you'll find his quote from the executive order that he signed pertaining to American Indian and Alaska Native students. And what he says is that he has a policy, it is the policy of my administration to support activities that will strengthen the nation by expanding the educational opportunities and improving educational outcomes for American Indian students in order to fulfill our commitment to furthering tribal self-determination and to help ensure that American Indian students have an opportunity to learn their native languages and histories and receive complete and competitive educations that prepare them for college careers and a productive and satisfying life. Within the School District of Omaha Public Schools, in their report to the community in 2013, in 2014, they developed a new strategic plan, and they have goals to bridge the gap of understanding. They opened the Office of Equity and Diversity, and they also opened the Office of Community, School, and Family Engagement. Go ahead and go on to the next one. It took many years and many years of decision making before this comfortable place of understanding what exactly is culture-based education. What is it coming to be? Before you, you'll see a timeline of laws and acts that were made pertaining to American Indians and the education of their students and their children. The decisions that impact the education of the American Indian learners, both directly and indirectly, have created, and all of these that you see on this timeline, they have created a unique relationship with educational professionals within county, local, tribal, state, and federal governments. As this circle of understanding perpetuates, so does the desire to build upon the strengths within public school systems so that culture-based education can be understood and eventually implemented. These collaborative efforts are the avenues needed in order to bring everyone up to par in understanding culture-based education and what it means for the future of American Indian learners in classrooms across the nation. And just to pull a few of these dates out, if you look at some of the decisions that were made that impacted Native communities, like one in 1953, Public Law 280, Congress took federal recognition and assistance to more than 100 tribes, creating an economic disaster for many nations. 1972, the Indian Education Act. 1978, the Education Amendment Act. 1990, Native American Languages Act. And then we go into the No Child Left Behind law in 2002. And then we come back, the government came back in 2006 and they developed a Native American Language Preservation Act to build upon the Act of 1990. So I'm sorry there's a lot of noise on here. Alan, I can't. Can someone mute their phone or mute that sound?
My wife has a selection of clocks, and that is one going off.
Okay, all right, it's throwing me off. All right, so then you come up to 2015, December of 2015, President Obama signed the Every Student Succeeds Act, which is meant to improve the No Child Left Behind law, and it helps to support and grow local innovations, including evidence-based, place-based interventions developed by local leaders and educators. And that's a really important law because the direction we're moving towards with culture-based education, it aligns perfectly to this national law that impacts all of our communities and our schools across the nation. Go ahead and go to the next. So, what you see before you is a Indigenous culture-based education continuum. And although there are other culture-based education models and research, this research action paper will be utilizing this particular Indigenous culture-based education continuum. And it comes from Regional Education Laboratories, which was formerly known as Northwest Regional Education Laboratory. Through trial and error and their plight to measure the level of culture-based education within schools that have a high population of American Indians and Alaska Natives, this particular continuum was formulated in response to the report that came from REL on the influence of CBE in academic performance. And in this report, they identified 6 critical elements of culture-based education programs. And if you look at the chart, you can see knowledge and use of social and political mores in the community. That aligns to this new law, the ESA law. EASA law. The strong Native community participation, including parents, elders, other community resources. Pedagogy in which teaching strategies are congruent with traditional culture, as well as contemporary ways of knowing and learning. Pedagogy that stresses traditional cultural characteristics and adult-child interactions as a starting place for education, and recognition use of Native American languages. Go ahead and turn the page. And just reflecting still back on the continuum, the elements that were selected for careful review for these standards were developed by the Alaska Native educators and Hawaii Kauai, which is also another culture-based education program, and they base this off literature from Demert and a formal review of each partner program that Regional Education Laboratories works with. Go ahead and go to the next page.
Oh, is it this page? The demographics?
Yeah, so this particular research action paper took place here within Omaha Public Schools. And Omaha Public School, their school mission is every student, every day prepared for success. This school, the school district is the largest in the entire state. They service 53,000 plus students. They have 63 elementary schools, 16 middle schools, 8 high schools, and 9 alternative schools. I'm focusing on 4th grade education standards for the state, so I thought it would be good to put the number of students in the district for 4th grade, and it's 3,958. They have magnet schools. The magnet schools are primarily all within the high school population. So of the 8 high schools, 6 of them are magnet schools, magnet high schools. And they focus on things like math, science. So if you want your child to be in performing arts or visual, they have an entire high school that freshman through 12th grade, all your classes will be geared towards visual and performing arts. And then they have one that's all math and science. And so all your classes would be geared towards math and science. So parents have a say-so in like where they want their children to be in these magnet high schools. Some are leadership, world languages, as well as international studies. And then they have a lot of academy schools within their elementary schools. And their academy schools have smaller classes and they have enhanced instructional support. And so they also have many civic and community organizations. They work together with OPS to fulfill their direct mission. And they have a good collaborative effort going with the communities here around the schools. OPS keeps the families, parents connected through an online portal. And anyone can get on this online portal, and there's a lot of community opportunities to support OPS and to support learning with the families and stuff. So they also do strategic planning with their communities, and they have that, everything's transparent on their online portal. They also have a Omaha School Foundation, which was founded with former alumni from their schools. And in there, they have a lot of opportunities for teachers and community members to write grants. And they could do grants and support their endeavors, whether it's in their classroom and the school doesn't have enough money to fund a project they're doing, they can write a mini grant through this foundation and it would help them to fund it. Go ahead and turn the page. So for some reason on this one, you gotta click it like 4 times art.
Oh, you get it.
All the way, it should go all the way to the writing at the bottom, where it says grade level 4 writing.
Okay, got it.
So when we're looking at the statement of the problem, we're assessing the culture-based education language and the standards for Nebraska education state standards. And so I thought it would be good to get the data on their assessments and to include that here. So for math, 17 of the 41 students that were native were tested proficient. And it dropped down from the year before by 5%. Language arts, 23 of the 42 were proficient. And they actually gained 4% of proficiency in language arts. And at 5th grade science, 19 of them, because they don't test them at 4th grade, so I thought it would be good to get the 5th grade level. Their science score, 19 of the 48 were proficient. And they dropped down 2% proficiency from the year before. In writing, 22 of the 42. Go ahead and turn the page. So these pages here, the next page should go over, let me see, math. So what we're looking at here on this page and the next 3 pages, you're looking at the matrix of alignment between Omaha Public Schools, 4th grade standards in math and culture-based pedagogy, according to regional education laboratories. So when we look, I just pulled the 4 main standards out and just looking at the language and seeing if there's any connections between the language of the standards for 4th grade and the language of the rubric for culture-based pedagogy. And we have not present, emerging, developing, and acting. And for math, it's not present. It reflects the contemporary social and cultural mores of the United States schools. So go ahead and go to the next slide. And so we're here in language arts, and even though we've seen an increase in proficiency for language arts over those 2 years, school years, they're still not present. There's no culture-based pedagogy. The language is not present in the standards. And so, again, language arts reflects contemporary social and cultural mores of the U.S. Go ahead and go to the next one. And interestingly, in social studies, some of the language, when we get to history, is emerging. It reflects incidental or partially planned efforts towards integration of local community goals and values. And so social studies is an opportunity for culture-based pedagogies in the standards, the language. So go ahead and go on to the next one. And then we're looking at science. In science, there's none present. It reflects the social and cultural mores of the United States. Okay, so go ahead and go to the next one. The purpose of this research study is to assess the inclusion of cultural-based education standards and pedagogy within Omaha Public Schools. The purpose of this research study is to assess the inclusion of culture-based education standards and pedagogy within the Omaha Public Schools 4th grade core course academic standards. And this research was all done on secondary data. So go ahead and go to the next slide. The importance of this research in creating an understanding of what needs to be done to meet the needs of a specific population through culture-based education. In order to support Omaha Public Schools in developing successful learners with their American Indian students, a strong nexus between state standards and culture-based education needs to be articulated, along with teacher training within these strategies. All the teachers must have that training to implement appropriate strategies. The results of this study will assist school leaders within Omaha Public School District in developing professional development opportunities best suited for improving teaching strategies that best fit American Indian learners. The historical aspects of culture-based education for the American Indian learner is very important in how it correlates to the Nebraska State Education Standards for grade 4 in order to strengthen the academic performance of the American Indian students. Go ahead and turn the page. Now, for the methodology, originally in my first school community action project, I did follow the policy, I followed protocol, and I submitted to OLC IRB, turned around and came down and submitted to Omaha Public Schools IRB, and I kept getting denied. So I had to take a different route. So my research went towards the de-identified data for Omaha Public Schools, and it went towards researching culture-based education and the review of Omaha Public Schools contextual framework and an assessment of all those and how do we bridge that gap? How do we find an understanding of correlation between the language that's utilized for the delivery of our education of our students, of our American Indian students? Okay, go ahead and turn the page. And this one, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I don't know. There's
That's
six clicks, and it'll come up.
That's the last word.
Native residents. So you have it.
And then go ahead and go on to limitations. Go on to because the definitions. I mean, you could look at the definitions, but when you go on to limitations, that's the next slide. You'll have to click 3 more times.
Limitations is up.
Okay, and there should be 3 bullets there.
Okay.
Okay, my school community action project actually became a research action paper because of my limitations. So, first of all, my research is limited to 1 grade level within 1 school district. And when I requested to observe the delivery of the Nebraska State Education Standards in 4 4th grade classrooms, I was denied 2 times for reasons unrelated. So that was another limitation. The research action paper was deprived the opportunity to observe teacher best practices in a classroom learning environment. It was a significant limitation in first-person observation for teachers' strategies in the 4th grade classroom. go ahead and turn the page. Oh, where am I at?
Findings.
Okay. All right. So can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Findings. So what makes this school district unique, besides the fact that they are responsible for the education of over 50,000 students in a unified fashion, is that it has a program that's weaved into the public school system called Native Indigenous Centered Education. And this NICE program services 900 plus of the American Indian population. This program itself has an important role in advocating for the American Indian learner with the school district to be college ready by 12th grade, as well as sustain their cultural identity with strong familial support and strengthened by positive life experiences, which really is their mission statement. And their mission statement aligns good with the Omaha Public Schools mission statement. It is a program that's under the umbrella of the Omaha Public Schools. It was developed with the Omaha Public Schools. It would be a benefit to the district to continue to give attention to building upon the strengths of the school district with the NICE program and culture-based education. So part of the findings I found that the achievement of American Indian students in OPS appears to be declining over the last several years. The Nebraska state education standards are lacking language and culture-based education. The Omaha Public School System does operate the Native Indigenous Centered Education Program for American Indians and Native Hawaiian. However, it remains a standalone add-on program without culture-based standards to guide the pedagogy. NICE has been a resource for OPS for a significant amount of time. A noteworthy bridge must be built between the two, with focused attention to the development of nexus between culture-based education and Omaha Public Schools that will provide a professional development program for teachers that will include coaching throughout the school year. OPS should be able to see significant improvement with teacher strategies to the learning environment. And I am done. Headshot to you. Kilomia. Oh, thank you. I'm getting a round of applause from the audience. Okay, so I'm done. Does anyone in my audience have a question for me?
I have a question for you, babe.
All right, here comes the questions.
All right, so how would you explain that the fourth grade writing, can you hear me?
How would I explain what?
That the fourth grade writing went from 79% to 52, I believe. It was a 27% drop. What happened?
That's a really good question. Was it in the writing that it dropped that much?
Yes, it's in the, let me see, I'm looking for it. It's in your statement of the problem, level 4 writing. 22 of the 42 tested were proficient, so it dropped from,
You know what? Oh yeah, I found it.
Page 10.
What makes it so difficult, what makes that so difficult to answer is that I wasn't allowed to go in and actually see the delivery of instruction. How were these standards delivered? How does the teacher translate them to the classroom? How does the teacher translate them to the students? How does the teacher utilize best teacher practices in order to implement the standard?
I guess.
And so I really can't answer why there was such a significance there.
I guess
Based off secondary data, I can't answer that question.
when you look at their standards, don't they break them down into a taxonomy of learning where they become more precise?
Yes, I looked into them.
Have you looked at the taxonomies to see if there's a cultural connection there
Yes.
also? I guess.
Originally with my colloquium, I had it broke down that way, and we ended up. It was a lot of information, and none of it lined up, except for social studies. So we ended up going back to the narrow version of the standard.
Yeah. Babe, I don't think he was finished with his question. It seems
Oh, okay.
Art?
Well, I think I was done, but I had another question too. It's like, I guess I'm really interested in how the ethnicity of the fourth grade students is going to affect the teacher's ability to differentiate instruction to meet the needs of the Native child. So I guess I'm wondering, what is the percentage of Native students within the Omaha Public Schools fourth grade? And the other ethnic groups that are present within that, within your study?
I actually have that answer.
Okay.
And, but I don't have the answer to the other ethnicities, just for, let me see, it's right here.
Could that be a limitation to your study somehow?
So like,
Sure, limitations
for
to deal
Native
with.
Americans in fourth grade for 2012, 2013,
Mm.
the percentage, the number of kids were, oh no, that's the wrong data. I'm gonna have to look into that. I came across it today though on their website, so I'm gonna take note of it.
Babe, if I could interrupt a minute.
Sure.
Going to Art's question about what I think I understood him to ask was how cultural-based education and the standards are carried out at the individual classroom. What is going on there that will influence, let's say positively, the Native American learner? I think what's important, Art, is that, if I have this right, is that Babe was actually hired by the Omaha Public Schools to be that instrument of change, to go into the class, to go and work with the faculties on implementing cultural-based education. And it is my belief that, Babe, when you started commenting that they weren't doing it very well, or they weren't working very hard on implementing that, they discontinued using that program. Is that correct? They didn't like the truth that you told them.
Yes. That's true. That happened.
So instead of taking that message and saying, oh my goodness, we'd better do better, how can we modify instruction to meet the needs of the American Indian learners? They got rid of the person that told them they needed to change.
But I get to come back and give them my published piece of work, so it's gonna be okay.
Okay.
You know what, we're looking at such a large school district, 53,000 students.
Yes.
Of 53,000 students, looking down at the elementary numbers, 900 were Native students. Is that correct?
Yes. It's like 932 or something like that.
Out of, and that is representative of K-12, that 900, or is that representative of elementary?
That's representative of preschool all the way up to 12th.
Wow, okay.
Preschool all the way up to 12th. And they have one preschool classroom that's just all natives. But other than that, the rest of them are all, they're with the rest of the population.
Right.
But they're doing a pilot program with just one all native preschool classroom. And I was actually helping them to develop their themes, their thematic units to align to culture-based education as well, whenever they let me go.
Would you be in favor of that, Dave? Would you be in favor of an inclusive, of elementary classrooms consisting solely of American Indian students?
I don't know. I don't know, if I'm home, it's fine, you know, up there, I guess. We have to be able to interact with all, we have to understand each other, you know, so.
But you're dealing with, I think, two different types of fruit between on the Pine Ridge and then in the Omaha Public Schools. Now, I would think in the Omaha Public Schools, from what we know about inclusive classrooms, inclusivity, and what we know about grouping, that I think that could be damaging. It could be wonderful maybe if it was handled right, but I think it could be, I would rather that the Native American students were celebrated in the regular classroom rather than pulled out into their own, where I'm sure
I get what you're saying.
Whispers.
I get what you're saying.
About the Indian kids over there. That just strikes me as my personal belief.
Thanks for asking me that, I appreciate that. Is there any more questions from anyone in the audience out there? I'm going to look into that number of Native kids at the 4th grade level.
I think it's very important to your study.
Yeah.
It's gonna add
and I'm
clarity
gonna
to
include
it, and it may have a big difference in the way that you respond to it. The findings and your suggestions at the end here.
And then I wanted to say one more thing too that I didn't get to touch on while I was presenting, but Omaha Public Schools, and I think this is going to unfold really, really well with, at the end of my paper.
Mm-hmm.
But the Omaha Public Schools has an online page you can get on, and you can develop your own curriculum, is what you can do. And community, it's available to the community, it's available to the people that are part of their strategic planning. And so what I see here in Omaha Public Schools is all the tools and avenues available to create this bridge of understanding with cultural-based education. They have every tool available for someone to come in and do it. And it's just awesome. I love it.
How well are the Native students doing on the standardized assessments of the school?
Not very
I mean,
well. If you
because
see on that percentage, they're only going proficient in that one core area.
Yeah, because I didn't see any of that data, which I would be interested in that. It's like, maybe they are meeting the needs according to the standards that they're presenting. You know, I mean, it looks like maybe more data that's gonna give you a better idea of whether they're really meeting the needs of these kids or not.
And a longitudinal comparison, 4th, 5th, 6th, and are, tracking them. Where is it going,
Yeah.
Well, my whole original study was on 4th grade.
Right.
It was on 4th grade,
Yeah.
so whenever I kept getting denied by the school district, I just decided to stay with 4th grade. I thought it was just too confusing for me to go and try to do something whole entirely different. But as far as proficient to their state standards, I have that data. That was on my statement of, I don't know, I'm looking through my PowerPoint, my hard copy, but I know I had the percentages up there. What was it on?
I don't know, I have a hard time.
Oh, on the
I guess
demographics?
I can't even
I don't
find
have
it.
a photographic
Sure.
memory. Down to the hour.
That's it.
Oh, okay, so according to the state standards at 4th grade, and I only had 4th math, language arts, and writing,
Right.
their proficiency dropped. I only did one from one year to the next, but I have all the data I could do across the years. I could get 10 years span. I think they go back all the way 15 years online.
Is it possible to look at that data and see how the Native American students have fallen within that?
Yeah,
I mean, you
and I
really
will.
need to do that.
Is there any
Okay.
other suggestions?
I don't know, but I would like to meet with your committee sometime. Before, like the 28th. Alan, are you still there? The 28th, I asked that their completed thesis needs to be ran by you for approval.
Oh, yeah.
And I asked you to supply a letter grade. I'm gonna email you in a couple of days, just a little simple electronic version of our rubric, scaled down. Because we have 2 outside reviewers that will review the thesis at the end. So it goes through, the committee supplies a grade, and usually it's just a pass-fail. But I'm asking you to supply a letter grade. Now, that doesn't mean that that's going to be the grade that she receives
But it's suggested.
for the final. It's just helping me. So my plans are looking at probably an average of the committee's grade in comparison to mine. For example, there's a letter grade, this is part of the requirement, the colloquium receives a grade. The approval for IRB, the RRB, those are all things that I need to evaluate as part of that grade. But then, on top of 3 reviewers and me, then there's 2 outside reviewers that look at the overall thesis, and I'm gonna ask them to apply a grade too. So I'm looking at an average of the 3 committee, my grade, and an average of the 2 committees to determine an ending grade for the course. Okay? So I'm gonna email that to you, that little brochure, or that little survey, and then at the end of it, it asks you to, if you were to give a letter grade, what would it be? And then I'll average. So be looking for that.
Okay.
So I
I'll make
guess,
sure they know. Alan's kind of hard of hearing. I don't know if he heard you.
I heard.
okay. For some reason, my voice is doing funny things too. It's been doing that. Anyway, I think we're done.
Okay.
And if you need to talk to me, any of you, I can give you my phone number. Alan, it's 605-441-2113. I don't know if you had a pen to write that down. I don't know if you...
I'll give him your number if he needs it.
Alrighty.
And I just want to thank everybody for your time and thank you for listening and make sure you guys watch out for dares and stuff when you drive home tonight.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. See you.
All right. Yeah.
I'm just amazed by the new technology that's hanging out that you taught me.
Well, it scared me, but we got through it, didn't we? We could look at ourselves as pioneers right now, maybe. A little bit. Okay. All right.
All right. Awesome.
Have a good night.
Good night.